If you order takeout food, do you leave a tip? How about if you just buy a single cup of coffee to go? Welcome to the new tipping dilemma, thanks to touchscreens at checkout. Hi there again, it's Jeff, and this is another plain English lesson, this time number 640. JR is the producer. He makes sure that the audios, transcripts, videos, exercises, and all the other lesson resources are up on the website for you. Today's lesson is at plainenglish.com/640. Well, here at Plain English, you know what we do. We help you improve your English with stories about current events and trending topics. By learning about the world, you'll also learn new words and learn to express new ideas in English. And today's story is all about tipping in the United States. Now, it might be confusing for you as a visitor, but don't feel bad because even Americans say that tipping has gone too far. In the second half of today's lesson, I'll show you how to use the expression once in a while. Remember, you can read along with the transcript at plainenglish.com/640. Ready? Let's get going. Welcome to the tipping backlash. More than most countries, America tips its service workers. But consumers say that in recent years, tipping has gotten out of control, and customers are starting to cut back on the amount and frequency of their tips. Let's take a step back. Tipping is expected in restaurants in the United States because of the minimum wage. There's a minimum wage for hourly workers. It's $7.25 per hour, higher in some areas. But restaurant workers are often exempt from these rules. That means they can earn just a few dollars per hour because much of their compensation comes from tips. So when you sit down at a restaurant, you are expected to tip the servers and bartenders because they can make less than the minimum wage. That's just part of the deal. You know that going in. Tipping is also expected whenever you get very personal service. When you get your hair cut, for example, or if you get a massage or a manicure, you're also expected to leave a tip. In other places, tipping has generally been small and very optional. Drop a few coins in a tip jar or $1 if you're feeling generous. And of course, many places don't accept tips at all. But two things have changed recently. The first thing to change was the pandemic. During COVID-19, many of us got to work from home and limit our contact with other people. In the U.S., white-collar employment held steady. We kept our jobs. We kept our incomes. But the same was not true for hourly service workers. Many service workers lost a large part of their incomes due to social distancing. So tipping increased. It was a way to acknowledge the risk and the working conditions of the people serving us in public. The pandemic is behind us now, but many people have gotten used to leaving more generous tips. The second, and arguably bigger change, is the proliferation of touchscreens for credit card payments. The new systems allow you to add a tip to your credit card payment. Now, the problem is with the design of the screen and how companies use these new systems. Many screens have big buttons on them suggesting a tip. Stores that didn't used to ask for a tip, or where tipping was small and optional, they are now specifically asking every consumer to leave a tip, and the minimum suggested tip is often 15 to 20%. The highest option is sometimes 30% or higher. I'm talking about cafes, bakeries, and counter service restaurants. Before, it would never have occurred to me to tip when picking up a pizza. Now, consumers are being asked, many say pressured, to provide a 20% tip or more, even when they don't get table service. And it's not just food service either. Even stores that wouldn't previously have allowed tips are asking consumers to pay extra. Repair shops, plant shops, dry cleaners, and other retail stores are now requesting tips at the time of payment. The screens add social anxiety to the consumers. Yes, there is the option to skip the gratuity or to add a smaller amount, but customers say they feel pressured to leave one of the suggested tips. It feels awkward to decline to tip when asked. The employee is standing right there watching you as you make your choice. And the people in line behind you might see too. At the same time, though, it feels unfair to be pressured into leaving a large tip. Tipping frustration shows up in delivery apps too. Most apps charge a delivery fee, but then they ask you to tip the driver. Consumers are left scratching their heads. Why do I have to tip the driver if I'm already paying a delivery fee? If you read the fine print, the delivery fee often doesn't go entirely to the driver. Probably the most egregious example is the self-checkout machine that asks for a tip. You can find these in convenience stores and in airports, among other places. Why, you might be asking, should a machine get a tip? The companies say it's for the employees that work behind the scenes, stocking the shelves and such. But this illustrates the frustration for many consumers. The people who stock the shelves, the people who make the sandwiches, the people who pour the coffee, they get paid an hourly wage. And many customers are happy to leave a little extra once in a while, but they think it should be the company's job to pay the workers and to set prices that allow them to do that. There's also a question about who gets the money. If you leave cash on a table, or if you leave cash in a tip jar, it's very likely to be distributed fairly and 100% to the shift workers. But if you're at a car wash and the company asks you to add 20% to your credit card payment, how sure are you that your tip is going to make it into the pockets of the workers there? For their part, service workers say that their wages haven't increased much lately, even though prices have increased. Bosses feel like they don't have to increase employee wages quite as much if they prompt customers to add a tip. Employees also say they suffer from the social awkwardness of the tip screen too. It's often not their choice to ask a customer for 25% or 30% in tips. They don't want customers to think that they personally are asking for a tip that's out of line. The new frustration with tipping is starting to show up in the numbers. Tips for non-restaurant service workers are down 7% from a year ago. I browsed Reddit for examples of places where people were being asked to tip. Ready? Jenny's Ice Cream. At one store, the minimum suggested tip was $5. Popcorn at the movies. An art supply store. Pest control. An oil change. Someone was asked to tip for an oil change. And then my favorite, a patient was prompted to leave a 20% tip on a $1,000 Botox treatment. Now, Botox is about the highest margin health-related thing you can have done. The clinics can afford to pay their workers. So I would say no thanks on tipping for Botox. Anyway, if you've traveled to the US and been confused about tipping, when, how much, you're in good company because clearly a lot of Americans haven't figured it out either. Once in a while is an expression that means sometimes, but not on a regular schedule. The fact that it's not regular is very important. If you do something once a day, you can't use once in a while. If you do it every week, every month, or even every year, you still shouldn't say once in a while. You have to use this for something that you do sometimes, occasionally, not on any kind of schedule. I live in Mexico City. It might surprise you, but I only eat tacos once in a while. The tacos are delicious here, but they don't fit into my diet. Still, I do like to get them once in a while. I was starving on the street the other day, so I got 2 tacos with chorizo and potatoes at breakfast time. The time before that was, I think, 2 weeks earlier. I had barbacoa tacos on a Sunday morning. Before that, it might have been a week and a half, or 2 weeks. I don't remember. And I can't predict when I will have them next. That's because I have tacos once in a while. If you have a lot of work to do, you might be tempted to work all day and all night. But it's important to take a break once in a while. That doesn't mean you should set an alarm and take a break every hour, but it means that a few times during the day, you should stand up, get something to eat, rest your eyes, clear your head, and then get back to work. And of course, it's important to take a vacation once in a while. This might only be once, twice, 3 times per year, but it's important to get that time completely away from work. Do you tip at a cafe or coffee shop? People are under increasing pressure to tip at cafes now that we have touchscreen payment options. I used to work at a frozen yogurt dessert shop as a teenager. It was one of my first jobs. Most customers didn't tip. This was before the days of touchscreen tip requests. Those who tipped left a few coins. They dropped their change in the tip jar. But once in a while, someone would leave $5 or something, and that would make our day. Once in a while, we'd leave with enough tip money to buy lunch at a deli the next day. So how often is once in a while? As you can tell from these examples, it's purposely vague. Tacos once in a while, that can be a couple times in a month, give or take, at least for me. Take a break once in a while, that can be multiple times in a day. Go on vacation once in a while, maybe just twice in a year. It all depends on the context, so you should only use this if your readers will understand what you mean. You can use once in a while in the past tense as well. If you're part of Plain English Plus, you may have seen a recent video about used to. That's all about how to describe a habit from the past. I don't have a car now, but when I lived in Chicago, I had a car. I used to get my car washed once in a while. Some people go to the car wash every week. Some people, you have to be a real car lover to do this, they would go more than once a week. I was certainly not that way. I went once in a while. Sometimes 2 months would pass and I wouldn't get a car wash. Other times, I'd go twice in a month. I don't have a car now, but I can use once in a while to talk about the past, what happened occasionally in the past. So I can say, I used to go to the car wash once in a while. And for more on used to, make sure you check out that video we have for you at plainenglish.com. These videos are great because they take you step by step through how to express a more complex idea in English. And we did 4 videos in total with used to. And they have exercises, quizzes, and chances to practice so you know you're learning it the right way. That's all at plainenglish.com, included in the Plus level membership. Now that brings us to the end of lesson 640. We'll be back here on Thursday when we'll talk about a reality TV show with a new lease on life, and it's coming from a surprising place. See you then.